Good evening and welcome to the Westford School Committee meeting for March 15th, 2021. Start with our housekeeping as usual. This meeting is viewable on Zoom as well as on Westford Cat. Thank you to them as always. And you can view that on Westford Cat streaming or on your cable access television. In your agenda and also appearing in the chat soon will be a link to Airtable. If you have a question or comment, you can put it in the Airtable. You can request to speak live or leave a written comment. I will forewarn everyone in advance. We try to do our best to get to Airtable comments and questions. Sometimes we are able to, sometimes we are not. At the March 1st meeting, I know we were not able to. That was my judgment call. For anyone who is frustrated by that, I will issue an apology. I made a judgment call in the morning, in the moment, really, and felt like if we had opened the floor up to the 40 some odd questions that were in there, we might have been here till midnight. So if you ever do have a question and it does get put in your table, please know all of those questions get passed along to administration and the entire committee. They are also part of the public record and anyone can request them. Last comment is if you have a question and you don't feel that it gets addressed tonight, please reach out to a different resource. Reach out to Building Leadership, reach out to someone else who can help address your comment, because unfortunately during these meetings, we're not able to address every individual question that we know people have. And unfortunately, we may not be able to do that tonight. Our agenda is rather jam-packed. We have issues of budget and the reentry proposal for the spring and a number of other business that we do need to attend to. So without further ado, I will turn it over to our superintendent.
Thank you, Gloria. I want to give you a couple of updates, several actually. Our K-2 Humanities Coordinator, Jen Traverso, has been recognized by Mass Literacy, and she has been asked to be a speaker to conduct a webinar on complex text. There were several outstanding people in the state who were selected for various components of that webinar, and we're proud to say that Jen was one of them that will be presenting on, as I said, the topic of complex text. From the Blanchard Middle School, I want to congratulate Adam Yee, Katrina Yang, and Krish Babu for earning the top 3 American mathematics competition mathematics exam scores. Katrina was also awarded a certificate of distinction for her impressive score. So just another more accolades for our outstanding students and our staff who are working with them. From the high school also this weekend, the Westford Ghost robotics team competed in the first qualifier round of the Massachusetts First Technology Challenge State Championship. The team performed so well, they were already qualified to move on to and compete with the state championship round. The team did a great job representing both their design and development. And in addition to qualifying, very impressive. The team also won the Collins Aerospace Innovation Award for the innovative intake and launcher design. And there was quite elaborate criteria for that. So once again, outstanding students doing outstanding things along with our staff. We're very, very proud of them, and they continue to make us proud. I do want to thank the parents in the community who have taken their time to arrange for vaccinations for some of our staff. This is a very special community, as we've known for years. And I want to recognize, and I apologize, I was given this list of names, and I apologize if I've missed anyone. But Sarah Nolan, Kristen Dennerhort, Heather Curley, Michelle Troy, Mary Matthew, let's see, Jenny Votano, Christine Millett, Sarah Cregan, Melanie Kern, Jeannie Williams, and Chantel Olmstead. Another parent I'm aware of that is not part of this specific group is Janelle Chaffee. So I want to thank all of them for helping our staff. You have gone above and beyond the call of duty, and I can't tell you how much we all appreciate what you have been able to do for our staff. It just increases their comfort level exponentially for a full return coming up shortly. So thank you again to them. Kerry and I were on a call with the commissioner last week where he spoke to us about the guidelines for the full return. And we'll talk about that certainly as Kerry makes her excellent presentation about the full return. And that is it for tonight. I'll try to keep it a little bit brief because I know we have a long agenda.
Thank you, Bill, and absolutely second on the kudos to the squad of parents out there who has really been helping back our teachers up. Just a huge team community effort and absolutely spectacular. Thank you so much. Dr. Cleary.
Thank you. I will be brief as well. The Mcas window for grades 3 through 5 has been postponed to May 10th through June 11th. Typically, we run Mcas in the April or May timeframe, April into May. And because of the re-entry, the state has chosen to shift those windows. So if you originally had heard Mcas was during a certain set of dates, then those would likely be, or they will be later. We are still waiting on the guidance from DESE around the 6 through 8, grade 6 through 8 window. And at this time, there's no mention of changing the high school dates. That's all I have.
Any school committee updates other than items that are already on the agenda? Chris.
I just wanted to let people know that this Friday, the 19th, the League of Women Voters of Westford is holding a virtual event, a Get Involved event. This is for our youth, so anybody can attend, but it's really focused for our young Westford residents to learn about how they, even as students, can get involved in various ways in civic opportunities in town. So I just want to alert people to that. It's this Friday at 7 p.m. It'll be a Zoom event, and you can register on the League of Women Voters website. You can Google that, and I'll also put that in the chat.
Bill.
Well, may I just mention one more item? As you know, kindergarten registration has taken place, and we will continue to register students. We have presently 243 students registered for kindergarten. I had projected 86 kindergarten students at the Robinson. We now have 78 registered. I had projected 105 at the Nabnasset. We currently have 91. I had projected 71 kindergarten students at the Miller. We presently have 74 registered. So I will keep you up to date. And that, as you know, is important to the population of full day K sections. And I'll be talking with the principals about that, the K-2 principals shortly.
Any questions on that? Okay, thank you, Bill. We will look forward to further updates. I know that is always a source of anxiety in the community. So we will keep you up to date as there is more information available. Student representatives, Brian, Hannah, any updates?
No big updates at the moment, but I know a lot of students are anxious and excited about the back to school decision. So everyone's kind of waiting to hear about that.
Fair enough. Anything additional, Brian?
No, that pretty much hits it all. Nothing much going on. Seniors have a t-shirt. We're finally getting our t-shirts this Friday, so that's exciting. Yeah, nothing really going on right now other than just waiting to go back.
Gotcha. And there'll be lots more news for seniors coming in the coming weeks. So hang tight. Okay, first item of business, superintendent search update. Alicia?
We are halfway through our finalist interviews, our public finalist forums and interviews. Last week we had Dr. Michelle Shannon and Dr. Margaret Adams. And this week on Tuesday, we have Dr. Christopher Chu, and on Wednesday, we have Dr. Matthew Jenger. And then on Thursday night, which is, I know, the event everyone is waiting for, Thursday night will be the deliberation and vote. If you have any questions about times of these forums and how to register, you should go to the district webpage. Superintendent search is there. And when you register for the public forums, for the public meet and greets, you will receive a link to the feedback form where you can submit anonymous feedback to us so that we can hear from the stakeholders in the district about what their impressions were of the candidates. So for more information, please go to the district webpage and stay tuned for the next 3 nights, 2 more interviews, and then deliberation and vote.
Thank you, Alicia, and thank you to the community who has been participating and tuning in to watch all these interviews and provide us with your feedback. We really do appreciate and value your input. So thank you very much. Any other questions from the committee on that? Okay, all the information is on that that webpage on the school district website, and there's a link right on the homepage to find it. So please continue to join us. Next up, Student Opportunity Grant.
Well, the state legislature decided to fund some additional state aid to communities a couple of years ago under what's called the Student Opportunity Act. Now, it will not be a large windfall for Westford because it, like other state aid entities, it is dependent upon income and property value. But we were scheduled to get $137,250 last year, or for this current fiscal year, I shall say. But like many other things, it's subject to appropriation. It was not funded. However, the governor and the legislature have approved a little bit different figure, $137,580 for fiscal 2022. Now, I have submitted an application to the state indicating how we want to use that money. One of the important priorities for the state is social emotional wellness. I have applied for 2 adjustment counselors at the elementary level. If those are funded, that will free up monies in my budget that I presented to you about a month and a half ago now. And the application requires your vote, that you do approve of what I have requested from the Department of Education, and we have to file that vote with the DESC. So I'm recommending that you make a motion and approve the application. I'll be glad to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions? Avery?
Thank you, Bill. I'm excited about 2 adjustment counselors, or the possibility of 2 adjustment counselors. That's great news for our elementary kids. I see in your application, you also allocated a little bit of money for technology and program materials. Could you just speak to that?
Well, we want to make sure that if there are any follow-up activities, particularly in relation to the Panorama program, that we're able to pursue those activities as robustly as possible. I'd like to meet along with Kerry and with Wendy Pekachik and Courtney Moran, who are very much involved in the wellness of students, to determine other types of specific materials that they feel are important for children to be placed before children who worked with the adjustment counselors. Keeping in mind, if we are funded in this grant, we still have a half a adjustment counselor in our budget. So that will give us 3 adjustment counselors at the elementary level, 1 to split between each of the 2 cohort schools. So that would be a big improvement to our effort. And as you know, our teachers have consistently told us that they need help with behavioral issues, with mental health issues, with anxiety, with depression, with stress in children very, very young. So I think this will be very beneficial to us.
Seeing no further hands waving, I will make a motion that we approve the superintendent's grant application for how we would use the Student Opportunity Act funds to support 2 adjustment counselors and some other associated materials and programming.
Second.
Second, and all in favor. Avery,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Ming Chen,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
and I. That would be unanimous.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Bill, and to everyone at central office who's helped develop that application. I certainly hope the legislature continues to fund the Student Opportunity Act at the similar or greater levels in future years. FY22 budget update.
Well, I'd like to present to you a revised proposal based on some things that have occurred recently that pertain to school start times. As you know, back several weeks ago, I made a presentation to you that I was advocating for a 4-tier school start time and therefore 4-tier school transportation schedule so that we could save some positions in our school system. The 4-tier busing would allow us to reduce the number of vehicles by spreading out the number of students and having fewer students in each run. And that would have saved us about $444,000. Now, please keep in mind that at that time, I based that recommendation to you on the information that we all possessed about the various sources of revenue. And that at that time, we were coming off 3 years of relatively lean budget appropriation increases, no fault of the town. It's just that, as you saw in my School Finance 101 presentation, new growth and Proposition 2.5 revenues are very cyclical and particularly been exacerbated by the pandemic. So we sought to reduce the budget by $444,000 by reconfiguring start times, which has been a goal of yours and been a goal of mine for the last 2 to 3 years. And so that savings allowed us a little bit of flexibility of changing school start times around. Chris, do you have the slides there that we can put up on the screen?
Sure, I'll bring this right up.
Yep. Okay, so if we could go to basically slide 3. Yep. So back in January, I originally made a proposal that we received parental input on. A lot of the input focused on the fact that there was too much time between the K-2 and the 3 to 5 students in terms of the configuration of the start times, that it would have involved about 1 hour and 40 minutes. And so I came back after talking with the leadership team with a proposal on March 1st. And I want to stress that this is a model that continues to be recommended by all of us, the principals and the central office administrators, which, yes, it does start elementary children earlier, but it does help us really observe the importance of sleep as it pertains to adolescence and depression, anxiety, alertness, academic performance. And so this was the schedule that I brought to you on March 1st. It continued to provide the intended cost savings. It better aligned the start times with research and adolescent sleep needs. It improved the progression of sequencing in a more logical order from a parent's perspective. As I said, it eliminated that 1 hour and 40-minute gap between bus pickups and bus drop-offs in the proposal that I brought forth on January 11th. And it shrank the overall window of time in terms of arrival and dismissal. So those were the positives. But once again, we heard from the community, and I have about 30 pages of questions that I have reviewed and made notes on. And a lot of the comments from parents was, that it was too much of a departure from the customary start times, that the childcare issues were really significant to parents, particularly in the afternoon, where children would have to spend a considerable degree longer in childcare, which really comes at quite a cost to parents, and we understand that. In this configuration, the March 1st configuration, that the older siblings would not be home before the younger children to babysit and to watch them. And the fact that of a lesser significance, but still of importance, is middle school after school activities and athletic competitions could be negatively impacted with the very late start time of 9:05 and the end time of 3:25. So with the comments that we received after March 1st, also, we kind of went back to the drawing board and said, look, what if, is there a path forward that might allow us to meet our budget parameters without the drastic change to a 4-tier start time and therefore 4-tier busing system? And so, Chris, if I can have the next slide. So about 3.5 weeks ago, Dr. Cleary was talking with me and said, you know, if we only had a few more sources of funds to deal with, we might be able to piece this together. And I said, well, we'll look at what we have. But at the time, we only had the $271,511 in the federal ESSER2 funds. This is sort of the second round of CARES Act money. What we didn't have early on when this money was announced were the regulations on how it could be spent. Because the CARES money from last year from the federal government had to adhere to what's called the supplant versus supplement provision. In other words, that source of money could not take the place of local obligations. We couldn't substitute that money for general fund monies to fund positions. Now this has changed. The new regulations with the ESSER2 funds, and I put the quote in here, is that the funds can be used to maintain the continuity of services in the local education agency and continuing to employ existing staff of the local education agency. So they're no longer the supplant versus supplement provision. So as opposed to trimming 6 jobs, if we didn't want to do the 4-tier start times, this would save 6 teaching positions. But we really didn't have anything else at that time until March 4th, where we were in a joint chairs meeting, 2 school committee members and myself, with the town manager and the chairperson of the board of selectmen and a couple of finance committee members. The town manager had told me a few weeks back that she had about $159,000 that was uncommitted in the FY22 budget process. And I said, well, please don't spend that, because I believe that $137,580 of that is the Student Opportunity Act money and belongs to the school system, for which I've had to make application to the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. That is the application that you just approved. And on that, on Thursday, the town manager, on Friday, the town manager sent an email to the select board and the finance committee, updating them that in fact that $137,580 in additional funds was the Student Opportunity Act monies that need to accrue to the school system. Okay, and so we're pleased that we were able to come to agreement, all parties, that money belongs to the school system and had to be applied for. So that we just found out on March 4th. And those funds are going to be used for 2 adjustment councils. I have 2.5 that I proposed in my budget to you. These funds will take care of 2 of those positions, and we'll keep the other half in our general fund budget. Now, in the last week of February, our 6 through 12 science coordinator Jenny Kravitz, came to the office and said she was going to have to resign to take another position, a diversity, equity, inclusion director position, a terrific position in another school system. Okay. So what Dr. Clary did, knowing that Jenny would be no longer in our employment and that our math coordinator will need a year's leave of absence next year, has a plan put together to consolidate those two positions into one STEM coordinator for grades 6 through 12. Now that brings about a savings of $60,000. So if you look at those last two entries, the Student Opportunity Act and the curriculum coordinator resignation that allowed the consolidation into a STEM position with a savings of $60,000, you add that to the ESSER funds, that approximates, was getting us close to the amount of money that we were short for meeting the town manager's request. And the reason that I had proposed the 4-tier busing. So Chris, if we could have the next slide. Now, last year, this current fiscal year, I should say, the town had talked with us about the possibility of sharing the costs of a facilities operations supervisor position, sort of a replacement for the role that Richie Crocker took in our school system and the town over many years. So I was able to confirm on March 3rd that that money was still being carried by the town in fiscal 22. And so we are able to reduce our general fund appropriation by $40,000 because of that cost share. The town is going to split our facilities director, Paul Fox, 60% schools, 40% town. The operations supervisor will be 75% schools, 25% town in terms of cost proration, because a bulk of that person's responsibilities will be associated with the 1 million+ square feet of building space in the school system. Once again, the first week in March. Now we've talked, a lot of the parents made comments in the feedback that we received that, look, we'll pay a higher bus fee to not have to engage in a radically new time scheme. Now we've tried to be reasonable here. This is still a reasonable fee that I'm suggesting of $350. We would have a family cap that pertains to 3 or more children, a family cap of $900. Okay, keeping in mind that for this fiscal year, if we had a conventional year and had charged the $350, our cap would have been $850. Okay, for the family cap. So I've figured that will bring in about $55,000 in revenue. The important aspect to that is I've figured that on a very conservative number of registrations, 2,200 registrations. Now, normally, I can tell you, historically, we've had 2,900 registrations. I just want to be careful and not overestimate to see us in trouble with with the revenue raised from fees. Now, knowing that we might pursue another path other than 4-tier start times and therefore 4-tier busing, I approached the bus company and said that I would like to renegotiate the price for next year, for fiscal 2022, if we remain with 3 start times and not 4. The original price was $409, and they were going to honor that for 4 tiers. I was able to negotiate that down to $395. Okay. Based on 35 buses. I want to be a little safe with buses, the number of buses also, and I'll show you that calculation a little bit later in the slide presentation. But that allowed us to save $162,719. What I'd like you to understand is I'm able to negotiate with a bus company when they are the singular bidder. If there had been another bidder that bid on the contract and lost, I could not have renegotiated a price with the bus company. Okay? But since they were the only bidder that submitted a bid that was responsive and responsible, okay, meaning that they met the terms of the specifications and that they had the experience to conduct a bus contract in accordance with the specifications, they were the only bidder, and I had the ability to renegotiate. Now, if you recall, Courtney Moran had some monies, new requested monies in my budget to you for testing materials and for Orton Gillingham, that's the OG, Orton Gillingham training. Courtney has just been notified that the state is funding, once again, for the first time since 2017, Grant 274. And so she's able to take this request out of our general fund budget, and now we can use state funds for that particular, for the training and for the materials. So that leaves us with a balance and kind of the plug here to get us home of $148,586 as additional school choice monies that will be committed to reach the $889,000 difference that existed between our budget and the town manager's budget without four-tier busing. Okay, so Chris, if we could have that next slide, please. So based on the comments, the numerous comments that I've heard that had to deal with childcare costs, disruption of family schedules, and I know that's not the priority that as a superintendent of schools I'm supposed to focus on, but that is a priority with families who have been through a tremendous amount of change and adaptation, some more tasteful than other forms of adaptation this year in terms of work schedules, losing work, trying to manage households. We've asked an awful lot of families that this may impact the ability of older siblings to watch the younger siblings. All right, and a large number of other comments that I've made notes on through every single question that came in. Many of them, many focusing on the childcare issue and that long period of time that my March 1st proposal would have involved in terms of childcare in the afternoon. So my recommendation right now to you is to maintain the current start times that we have right now for the next school year. And that we continue to have this, you along with the new superintendent, continue to have the goal to plan start times that align with sleep research via an upcoming 3-year strategic plan. That takes it out of the short containment of a budget season, allows us to plan a little bit more succinctly, allows us to engage more with the community in terms of what works educationally and what is easier for families to adapt to. It's been a very difficult year for everyone. So Chris, if we can have the next slide. So I wanted to provide you with an analysis of school choice, where we are with school choice. Starting in fiscal 21, this current fiscal year, we started with a balance of $777,484. Our anticipated receipts, as reported by the Department of Education, are $387,561. Now, I've had some questions from the public saying, well, wait a minute, we have 63 students times 5,000. That doesn't necessarily equate to 387,000. No, it doesn't. But the supplemental school choice funds that we receive for any school choice student that receives services via an IEP is also received by us. And so that's the difference between $5,000 times the number of school choice monies and the amount that we actually receive. Okay. So that gave us a balance of a little over $1.1 million going into fiscal 21. Now we have committed $600,000 in this year's budget of school choice. So that gives us a balance of $565,000 anticipated year-end balance. Okay. Now we've preliminarily used $167,000 to offset costs in the fiscal 2022 budget, next year's budget, which leads to, as of right now, a fiscal 22 beginning school choice balance of $398,000. Now, next year's anticipated school choice should be somewhere around $395,000. Okay, could be a little bit more, but that's the best estimate right about now. So that will give us a total school choice availability of $793,045. However, a caveat, as you see in bold there, that's not including what I've just proposed to close the gap, which is $148,586. So if you subtract that from the 793, that gives us a balance available for fiscal 22 in 22, which counts the receipts they received next year, okay, of $644,000 and change. So that is the amount that once we end out this fiscal year and receive the school choice allocations for next year, fiscal 22, taking out the $148,586 that I've used to close the gap to go to from 4-tier to 3-tier start times, leaves us with $644,000. Now you compare that with the 1.1 million up above, the balance available, okay? That's a sizable chunk. That's almost $500,000 less in fiscal 22 than available in 21. So is there always a risk involved? Yes, there is. But on the other side of that risk coin is the reality, hopefully, that with the reduction in the transmission of the COVID-19 virus, federal, state, county, local revenues will begin to increase, particularly hotels and meals taxes locally that lost about $500,000 just in Westford alone this past year. So there are always risks. Yes, we do have some school choice monies remaining in fiscal 22, less and much less than in 21. But we have to look at it optimistically that we'll still have that same configuration of start times that we presently do. And that the strategic plan will not only plan for educational programming, but for fiscal planning also. So Chris, if we can have the next slide. Here was the renegotiated bus contract. We'd originally budgeted 36 buses at $409 per day. And you see the 2.66 million. I've gone with 35 buses just to be safe. We think we can do 34, but I can't cut that too short. I'd rather have the money in there and say we can reduce it later on than have too little and come forward or the next superintendent say, well, we don't have enough money in the transportation account. So 35 buses at $395 per day. So that gives us a saving of $162,719. Now, the 395 is really in the ballpark for 3-tier. What I've done is I've done a survey. I have about 10 school systems. The average for 3 tiers is about it was $398.99. So $399. So it's right in the ballpark of some other 3-tier bids. A little bit higher, a little bit lower than some. Chris? So here's the town school facilities cost share. Once again, Paul Fox, the facilities director, will be paid 40% from town funds, 60% from the school. The facilities operations supervisor, who will be working primarily in the school system most of the time, is 25% town, 75% school, with a savings of $40,000. And Chris? Now, there's some question in terms of the balances in some of our revolving accounts. And I wanted to present you, there's actually 2 pages of revolving accounts here. The one thing you need to keep in mind, however, is that revolving account revenues statutorily can only be expended for the purpose for which they were collected. In other words, I can't use Westford Academy parking fees to pay teacher salaries. We can't use athletic revolving account fees to pay for the general bus contract to and from school. Now that is used for athletic runs, okay, to out of town and within town. But you see that there are not revolving funds, excuse me, are not general sources of revenue. So Chris, if we could have the next page also. So this is the extent of our revolving funds. They have been an important source of offsetting our budget. Keep in mind that we use $4.9 million, almost $5 million in revolving funds to supplement our general fund request. So that general fund request that you saw from me back in early to mid-January was not our entire financial profile for all of the programs and services. We use 4.9 million, as I said, almost $5 million of this to supplement the general fund appropriation, as do most other school systems, and virtually all other school systems. Chris, I think that's probably it. And so the important thing that I want to convey is, because I've been a school administrator for a long time, and I know that sometimes the reaction is, well, they all of a sudden found the money that they had and they didn't disclose. That's not the case. That's why I put those benchmark dates associated with each source of some of those sources of money, so that you understand that just within the last 2.5 to 3 weeks, this was all able to come together, particularly after the pages and pages and pages and pages of comments that we received from parents, and we did read through them. Now, I apologize that we didn't have time to answer all of them, but there were common themes in all of the comments, and it's too much of a change. We don't like our younger children being out so early in the morning. Childcare expense will be too much for us to bear, given the length of time for younger children. So those were some of the more frequent among comments. So I'll be glad to answer any questions that any of you or any of the public have, to the extent that we have time for.
Thank you for that explanation. I know there was a lot of information for the committee and the community to absorb. I've got I guess a comment and a question, and then I'll certainly open it up for the committee as well. Everybody at this virtual table we've got going here knows I'm a huge advocate for later start time for our adolescents and really healthy start times for all our kids. So I really do want to thank the leadership team for all of the work and thought that went into the March 1st proposal. I have the utmost respect for our leadership team, for their expertise, for their judgment about what is best for kids and what's best for education. That goes without saying. And I completely, to this day and in the future, will stand by the goal of healthy start time for all of our students K to 12. But the way this goal came about during this budget season, it very much became intertwined with the financial need to potentially go to 4 tiers and reap the associated savings. I think the 4 tiers, because it creates those extreme times, the extreme early time of the 1st tier and the extreme late time of the 4th tier, really took what would have already been a big change for the community and made it an even bigger change during a time that our community has just seen way too much change this year. And I just do not think there was a lot of community appetite for yet another change. and I have to respect that too. Given that there was, and I do feel like we've been on a bit of a budget roller coaster ride. I think all budget seasons can be like this to a certain extent, but this one it has had more extremes in that way. But given that there was some new availability of funding and new, especially with the ESSER II grants, the understanding there was additional flexibility about how to spend those funds in a way that that we didn't have with any of the previous CARES Act funding. I commend the administration team for going back to the drawing board and trying to see if there was another way to close this budget gap without the associated savings from 4 tiers. So I've just got to start with commending both the leadership team for their judgment and the administration central office team for being willing to look at all possible paths. So I guess I land with 2 caveats. I can personally support this new kind of budget direction to maintain the 3 tiers and go in this direction similar to what's certainly been proposed here by the superintendent. But I guess these are my 2 caveats. And one is, I think we need to say to the community very transparently, healthy start times is still a priority, I think, for this committee and the leadership team. And I think it needs to be maybe parsed from the financials, and maybe needs to be part of a strategic plan that's developed next year. And hopefully that goal can be achieved in a 3-tier system or a modified 2-tier system. I know the Citizens Action Committee looked at a number of different options that were 3 tiers and modified 2 tiers. And I think that needs to remain a priority. But I can also understand why this was not the year to reach that goal. The other caveat I have is a financial one, and I think it is something that the committee and the community need to fully understand. With the plan that the superintendent just outlined, we are using what is effectively one-time funds, the ESSER II grant and the student opportunity funds, to support salaries. That historically has been kind of a cardinal financial no-no. We don't like supporting salaries with one-time funds because that's someone's salary, and we want to be able to make a commitment to them, not just for 1 year, but for, you know, all the years in perpetuity. In this particular instance, the Student Opportunity Act, knock on wood, will continue to be funded at similar or higher levels in future years. The ESSER II grants, we have no way of knowing if those funds will continue to reoccur, but as the superintendent indicated, there may be other financial support from the state or federal government. There may be recovery of some of our lost revenue from this year, that revenue may recover better next year as the impact of the pandemic lessens. There could be, you know, potentially better growth in town. 1.4% is just a historically low increase to our town appropriation. One would think that we would hope, knock on wood, that we would be in a better financial position next year. But everybody in approving this direction also needs to recognize that there is a certain amount of financial risk. I believe it is a calculated risk. I believe it's reasonable, but we also need to recognize it, and I think we need to call it out and be transparent about it. I guess that ended up being more of a comment than a question, except to maybe toss it back to you, Bill, and say, do you feel like I accurately portrayed what we are saying is a calculated financial risk here?
Yeah, absolutely. We we've never made it a point, even when we had the stimulus bill, the American Reinvestment and Recovery Act under President Obama, we didn't use it for salaries. Of course, that was over $1 million, but yes, there is always an inherent risk in using one-time funds. And here's where we're banking, as you said, on a little bit more robust federal, regional and state economy and local economy to hopefully replenish some of those funds.
So with that, any questions from the committee about where we are or how we got here? Ming Chen.
I think Bill probably mentioned it briefly about combining the math and the science coordinator into the STEM coordinator. I need to understand a little bit more about the financial savings because that means we're having like one less position, but the saving is only $60,000 for the next fiscal year.
Yes, some of the, there is some teaching funds involved in that also. And so it's not only the savings from the two positions being combined, but we had to deduct a little bit from the original estimate of savings, Ming Chen, for paying for the teaching load that will be incurred also. So that I can present you, I'll be glad to. I don't have the exact numbers right in front of me. I probably should have included that in the presentation, but I'll be glad to present that to you in terms of the savings and the proration of monies.
Do you want me, I could just add a little more context, Bill,
Sure.
if you don't mind, Gloria. Each of those coordinators are only a 0.8 administrator because they each teach a 0.2. So they're 0.2 teachers, that isn't going away. So it's only the 0.8 administration side of the science coordinator and the 0.8 administration side of the math coordinator. So 0.8 plus 0.8 equals a total of a 1.6 of administrators that we would be kind of saving. Then we would add back in a 1.0 administrator for that STEM curriculum coordinator. So the savings would be a 0.6 administrator. Not
So the new STEM coordinator wouldn't actually have the 0.2 teaching responsibility anymore.
Exactly. Yes. And we will come to you within the next couple of, or a few meetings with that job description so you can see a little bit more clearly because anytime we do shift a job description, it requires school committee approval. So once we're ready to do that, we'll bring it forward to you for approval and you'll be able to see what those differences are.
Yeah, thanks for the explanation.
We'll give you that specific cost breakdown also.
Yeah, I would also recognize that I appreciate the administrative creative thinking there in terms of combining these positions. I know there's really been a precedent set on the town side during these difficult financial times that if someone does move out of a position, that we should kind of go back to the drawing board and instead of automatically replacing that person, maybe reevaluate whether there are some positions that can be combined. I can also see some advantages in having someone overview STEM education. We've had this interesting setup at the high school, I think, for a certain amount of time where computer science has been part of the math department and engineering has been part of the science department. And, you know, these fields have such dramatic overlap. So I think there could be some curricular benefits to having someone oversee that entire field. I think it's an interesting idea to explore and try. Avery.
I think Chris was first.
Sorry, Chris.
Well, I can go, Chris.
Yeah, go ahead.
Arm wrestle, you guys, figure it out.
Oh, Bill, could you tell me again the cap, the family cap on the busing, what it was going to be and what it will be?
Yes, well, this year, let me put it in perspective. This year, if this year had have been a normal school year, the fee would have been $325 with an $850 cap. We're proposing a $350 fee with a $900 family cap for 3 or more children.
Okay. Thank you.
Mhm.
Go ahead, Chris.
Chris.
Yeah, I was going to tag on, Gloria, you talked about potential benefits of the consolidation of the curriculum coordinator position. And I hope that's true. And I was just going to ask that, Carrie, next year, we sort of check in on how that's going. I think it's a good idea for us to, when we do make a change like that, to update and make sure that you know, panned out the way we saw. So I know you will. I know you'll keep us up to date on how that looks. Otherwise, I had a lot of comments and questions, but Gloria, I think you took them all. So I guess I would just say, you know, I also am been a strident advocate of getting later start times for our adolescents, and won't stop pursuing that, but also agree that when everything was sort of laid on the table, it was going to be really hard to do that in a way this year that was going to work for a large percentage of our families. So I think we will get it done. And it will, and by the way, when we do it, it will cause a shift and it will cause change. And some of our students and families who are used to a 9 o'clock start may have a much earlier start, but hopefully we can do it under something less than a 4-tier busing system, and those changes will be less abrupt. And we have a little time. I think people now are aware that this is something that's very likely to be looked at in the near future. So hopefully that helps. And hopefully it won't be any year where we're in a pandemic that has just thrown so much upheaval everybody's way. Otherwise, appreciate all the thoughtfulness by the administration on putting this together.
Valerie.
Avery might have had an add-on. You can go ahead.
No, I have a different question.
Oh.
Choice question.
I just had a couple clarifications. I appreciate the work that has led to this. I support this new proposal. And I just wanted to understand first the facilities operations supervisor. That's a new position, right?
Yes, we talked about that, oh gosh, back in the late summer, early fall. We decided to hold off since our facilities were essentially closed at the time to students. We decided to hold off funding that, but that is a position that I'm going to bring back to you. I would say in the next month or two, in terms of a job description, and talk to you about funding that so that we could have that person on board for the summer, because the summer is such a busy period of time in terms of large scale maintenance and capital improvement projects, not only in the school system, but in the town, but primarily in the school system.
So how does that savings work though? Was that position budgeted 100% in next year's budget?
We were carrying that really 100% in our budget because we weren't sure if the town was going to continue to carry the 40,000.
Okay. And so is the facilities director split the same as it was, or is that a new split?
No, that will be a new split beginning July 1st.
And what was it previously for those of us that don't remember?
It was pretty much 75 school system, 25% town.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
And then I just wanted to circle back to the school choice to make sure I understood that correctly. So you're saying that for FY22, before this new proposal, you were projecting to use 167,000 in FY22 total?
That's correct. That's what we had as an offset in the budget that I presented to you.
Okay, so then with this new proposal of 149, that would be like 315,000
Mm-hmm.
in FY22, but in this year we used 600.
Right, we have an offset of 600,000 in the current fiscal year, fiscal 21.
And was the 600K like planned to use for FY21, or was that like kind of because of the lost revenue and pandemic?
It was planned for the most part. Each year we look at what our appropriation is from the town and what we need to piece together in revolving funds and school choice funds, circuit breaker, And that's what we calculated for this this fiscal year.
Okay. So I understand the risk of using one-time use funds for salaries and, I'm sorry, the risk of using the ESSER funds.
Mhm.
But I think I feel comfortable using the school choice funds because that in previous years, we've used more than what you're proposing for FY22. So I think that's a reasonable plan going forward. And that to me feels right as kind of a rainy day fund to get through this.
Yeah. I do want to make it as clear as I can to the public that this school choice fund is not a slush fund. Okay, it is a fund that is not specific to a fiscal year. We receive $5,000 for each school choice student. Okay, and that is to pay for the additional cost that student brings to the school system. It doesn't necessarily mean an additional student requires an additional bus or additional teacher. So the marginal cost of that additional student is relatively small. But in addition, once again, the state provides us with a supplement if any of those children need services in special education through an IEP. So, and that can be over $100,000 sometimes.
Yeah, understood. I guess when I went back a couple years, it looks like it's been growing and we've used more than 315 before in previous years. So I support this. Thanks.
Mhm.
Avery.
So I thank you, Valerie, for teeing that up because I have a follow-up school committee school choice question. Bill, is there a recommended amount to keep in a school choice? I know with circuit breaker, we're not supposed to spend current year's circuit breaker. Is that sort of the rule of thumb that we shouldn't spend what we have until we get next year's, or is there a rule of thumb in that?
There is no requirement from the DESC that it is specific to a fiscal year. It all depends. That's what's so unique about school choice and so helpful is that when we look at putting together a budget, we don't look at a singular year. We look at maybe 2 years, possibly 3 years out in the future, and what might the revenues look like at that point in time, and therefore, do we recommend spending more or less in school choice to maintain a stable amount of programming and services and staffing to our students? And so there is no requirement that it has to be spent in the following fiscal year or following 2 fiscal years. And so it is that amount of money that allows us to not have to go back to the finance committee for a request for a transfer from the reserve fund. Because we want to make sure that we can leverage our financial position and our stability from one year to the next. And if you talk with our staff, that in their view has been one of the most important benefits of careful fiscal planning over the last 10, 15, 20 years is that we don't have that sawtooth effect, add and delete, add and delete, add and delete. We've kind of been very careful in fiscal planning.
And I guess the other question, I don't know if it falls under budget or under reopening. So I apologize if it really is more reopening. Are we planning to collect bus fees during the reopening?
We will for those students who have not paid a bus fee. We determined we'll only charge $150. Okay. We will be determining approximately how many students will require a bus pass. We don't know that with precision right now, but we are working on that information, but it will be $150 for the remainder of the school year.
Going back to the school choice topic, there were some comments in the Airtable from FinCom member Heather Fitzpatrick, who commented, "I would like to see the committee adopt policy on school choice as the balance seems to be growing. Yes, it is now less than 21, but I think higher than previous years." She also had the same comment pertaining to revolving and reserve funds. How much should be used and how much should be saved and when they should be used. I think that's definitely a topic that the finance subcommittee could take up in the future. I think it should be, clear to the community about how those funds are used, how they can be used, if there should be any limitations on that. I think that's a reasonable comment to pursue for the future. So there is also,
Say the only statutory requirement associated with school choice is it cannot be used for capital projects.
thank you for that clarification.
Just the school choice, is that for current number or are we looking at increasing our number?
We presently have 63. I'm just surveying the principals again right now to see how many vacancies they might have, even right from K through grade 12. We've had a guideline of kind of topping it out at 75, but I'll let you know that within the next several weeks, because we need to take a vote before June 1st of each year and inform the DESC of how many openings and at what grade levels.
But your estimate for next year's funding is for our current year or for an increase?
No, it's a slight increase. Yeah, what I don't know right now, Avery, is how many might be involved in that supplement with special education. So I've been a little bit conservative on that. So 395 could be as high as 400, but I think 395 is a safer level.
There's another question pertaining to start times. Can the bus for the high schoolers start later with the 3-tier system? That would allow those who use the bus to sleep a bit more. So I guess the question is kind of, are there any alterations that can be made while we're not making the big change, still within the 3-tier system, that would help the students somewhat?
I'll have Jen Piper. We've talked about this frequently. We met with the bus company over the last couple of years to see if we could shade that pickup time a little bit later in the morning. And I'll have Jen Piper, our transportation coordinator, meet with the bus companies, what we can do in terms of pickup times starting next year.
The other question I've seen related to this issue is if we aren't changing start times, is Westford Academy still going to pursue the 5 drop 2 schedule?
Yes, they are.
Will that schedule, as it was kind of initially outlined, potentially be different now? Like, would it be the same with the chunk at the end of the day, or would the details potentially shift now?
They may shift. I know Mr. Antonelli is meeting with the coordinators and his administrative team. If the vote tonight is to retain the 3-tier system.
Okay. Other questions? There are some other questions in the Airtable, but they seem to pertain to the reentry topic. So any other questions from the committee? Seeing no hands waving at me, I will, and this is kind of I think a unique motion that we're making at this point, but I think for the clarity to the community, clarity of direction to our administrative team, it is helpful if we can, while we're not approving the entire budget and every detail that has been proposed to us this evening, I would like to make a motion that we approve, the administration's shift in plans in accordance with the superintendent's recommendation provided to us this evening, March 15th, to continue to develop a budget plan based on 3-tier busing and our current start times. Sorry if that was kind of a funkily worded motion. And any questions on that motion? Again, to clarify, we're not approving every single detail that's in this plan. We're not necessarily taking a vote on the particular bus fee increase, et cetera. We will take those votes at a future meeting. I believe those will be scheduled for next Monday night. But we do really need to give the community and the central office team some direction that they're on the right path and should continue along this plan. So any questions about that before we vote? Okay, seeing none, vote is to Avery.
We have a second?
Chris seconded.
Okay, he did it quietly. I'll say aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Ming Chen,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
aye. So that would be unanimous.
May I just say thank you. I know how wearing this has been on all of you. And thank you for your patience with us.
Thank you, Bill. We're all riding the budget roller coaster together, and we will make it to the end of the ride. Next up, school calendar.
Well, we have brought back the school calendar with a bonus. The back page is here for this meeting. I apologize, we inadvertently left it out at the last one. A couple of things about the calendar. The only input that I had from the DEI committee was a suggestion that we change Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, but you can correct me if I'm wrong. I believe there was an article at last spring's town meeting to do so, and that was defeated, if I recall correctly. And so there are 14 states presently who celebrate what's referred to as Indigenous Peoples Day. Some of them on the conventional Columbus Day, some of them different than Columbus Day. So that's why we've continued to use the convention and the holiday of Columbus Day on the calendar. There was a couple of questions about the Jewish holidays, about only the first night being circled instead of 2 or more nights. That is explained, in the calendar, but we wanted to circle those beginning nights so that our staff pretty much understood, and the parents' homework issues, testing, et cetera. The conference days in the calendar committee, some of the teachers had wanted to change the convention in November to make the 22nd the 2-hour delay day and the 23rd a no school day, and then the half day on Wednesday just prior to Thanksgiving. In talking with the leadership team, we thought that might be a little bit of an interruption to the momentum of that week. It's a chopped up week to begin with. We want students to have as much of a classroom experience as possible. But the other issue associated with that is we'd like to try, and the leadership team was enthusiastic about this idea, trying both in-person and remote conferences. Now, obviously, they wouldn't be scheduled at the same time, so the teacher would have to sit down with some parents in person and then run to the computer to do a virtual conference. That would be scheduled specifically in blocks of time. And I think that can work very effectively. It worked very effectively at the high school this year. So, the calendar once again has the conventional school start and dismissal times, the early release times, conference dates, back to school nights, et cetera. And we're seeking your approval of that because this is the time of year where we begin to get calls from parents saying we're trying to schedule our vacation during the school year and during the summer, and we'd like to know what the calendar is going to look like.
Any questions from the committee? I had a couple, but I think, Bill, you just addressed all of them. So anything else? Seeing no hands, motion to approve the proposed calendar for the 2021-22 school year.
Second.
I think we got a couple seconds there. And vote is to you, Avery.
Aye, and I have a request. Can Bill tell us when the last day of school is this year?
Yeah.
Oh boy, I knew you were going to ask that. Hold on. will you vote and let me find that?
Fair, fair enough. Fair enough. The vote continues to Chris.
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Ming Chen,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
and I. So that would be unanimous, and Avery gets bonus points for the question mid-vote.
The answer to is the 21st as of right now of June.
Okay, so we do kick into the following week. All right.
Yes. Yes,
Okay.
the 17th was the original end date. We've had 2 snow days, which took us to the Friday, the 18th, and then Monday, the 21st.
Okay.
I actually have a follow-up to that, but it's part of the next discussion and whether or not any of the reentry will affect the 180-day and the snow day moving. Are we anticipating that? But that's probably part of the next discussion.
The commissioner has not relaxed the 170 days, so everything is still on track.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, are we ready to move to next order of business? April school reentry plan update and proposal.
Okay, thank you very much. I will say that this presentation, at least the thinking behind it, has gone through several iterations. And while the term of the year is pivot, our pivots turned very quickly to pirouettes. And then I would call it kind of a high speed spinning at this point. But here we are, and we're excited to share our plan. I have with me today Susan Dubois, the principal of the Mabnasset School, Chris Sardella, the principal of the day school, 3 to 5, Christopher Chu, Stony Brook principal, 6 through 8, and Jim Antonelli, principal of WA. So I am going to take a moment and just share my screen. There we go. Okay, so first I kind of want to orient you and remind you of the background. Back in February, early February, the week of the 8th, we had an original proposal where we surveyed staff and families. The survey was due on February 23rd, and our original thinking was to merge both pods A and B together in the morning, release them for lunch, and then be virtual live in the afternoon. And we thought that that was an incremental way to achieve a full return. And we were looking to start that on April 26th. Then the week of February 22nd, Commissioner Riley signaled that he was going to request the authority over structured learning time from the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education. And this would allow him to determine when hybrid and remote learning no longer counts towards structured learning time. And as a result of that signal, our school committee, all of you, issued a formal 45-day notice to our staff regarding a full return. And that notice went to them on February 24th, because in our locally agreed upon hybrid memorandum of agreement, or MOA, we had agreed that there would be a 45-day notice if we were to shift to a full return, so we could provide adequate time for planning. I would like to point out that the 45th day from when that was issued is April 12th. Then Friday, March 5th, the Board of Elementary and Secondary Education granted the commissioner the authority that he had requested. And on Tuesday, March 9th, the commissioner's guidance came out on a full return. So here we are. And instead of sharing the information about the original proposal of the merging of the pods in the morning, we're now shifting to what the updated regulations are per the commissioner's latest announcement. So in this presentation, we're going to provide you an overview with key staff and parent survey results from the February survey. This is not from the survey that is currently open right now. It was the survey from the pod merge proposal. Now, we aren't proposing that to you, but some of the key pieces from that survey are kind of applicable to give you all a framework of the thinking behind teachers and parents in terms of merging pods together. So I'll go through that data very quickly because it's not what we're looking to shift into, but it does give us some helpful information. Then we'll share with you a proposed timeline and a plan for the spring, as well as after we share the proposal, what the next steps would be, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions. So for the key survey results, we have posted all of the quantitative pieces on the internet, on our COVID section of the website. All prior surveys are available for staff and for families on that as well. And the full set of data is on there, has been posted. I think on Friday we posted that. So this is just to give you an understanding of how many responses we had to that February survey. We had just over 2,700 families, and they were split between hybrid and RLA families, and we received 415 responses from staff. And we were frequently in every survey taking advantage of the opportunity to understand, just in general, how are we doing? Do you like what we're doing? Do you not? And as you can imagine, as I know all of the school committee members have heard, there are very different views. Some are struggling with our current model. Others have settled in nicely and feel as though that it's going well, or as well as it could, given the fact that there's a pandemic. So you can see for the families, we had 65.5% say that the quality is good to impressive. We combined two of the answers. Some say one answer was that it was good quality given the pandemic, and the other one said, I'm very impressed. And we combined those to just put together the positive feelings about it. And it was 65.52, while 34.48 felt the quality should be higher. Shifting over to the staff, we had 92.58% of staff feel as though things are going well or impressively, and 7.42 staff members feel that the quality should be higher. And under normal circumstances, we would certainly raise an eyebrow on 34.48 families saying that the quality needs to be higher. But truth be told, we were fairly proud of this information, given what we are having to deal with and the amount of obstacles that we have to overcome, and the fact that what we are providing students is not at all what we know is the best type of education that we can provide, because we know that it couldn't replace face-to-face or full-time live instruction. So then we asked the same question about the RLA model. That previous slide was specific to the hybrid, and now this is for RLA. And so you can see here, between the families, there was only 11.25 that feel the quality should be higher, with 88.75% saying that the quality is good to impressive. And then the staff, we only had 17 staff members, and they're only at the K-5 because the staff that were led to this question are full RLA staff only. And the staff at the secondary levels, while they do have RLA students, they also have hybrid. So these 17 staff members are the ones who are full-time. Both pods were fully remote, and you can see 100% of them feel as though it's going well. So it's interesting. It does show that those who selected RLA, for whatever reasons that may have been, it seemed to be a great choice for them and a great fit. Then this is one I wanted to just point out, because we asked what families and staff's feelings were toward or around the proposed hybrid model, and that was the merging two pods. So the key piece here is that this is the first time where people reported their feelings on bringing both pods together. So while we're not doing this proposed model anymore. We are looking at a full return, in which case both pods come together. So this we found very helpful in our thinking. So you can see that the vast majority of families support the proposed model and would prefer to shift in that direction over maintaining the current model. And again, this is for hybrid staff and hybrid families, whereas it was a little bit more or a lot more split with the staff members, and just over half were in support of the proposed model. But there's an asterisk there because that 51.03% of staff who are in support of that model, that's actually made up from two buckets, that 51%. 25% said, yes, let's just do it. Whereas 26% said, would like to do it, but only with certain conditions. So the 51% are people willing, but it was split, that 51% was split almost in half, where half of those who are in red said only under certain conditions. And the conditions, 100% of them mentioned the vaccine. And then similar to how pleased are you with the RLA model, now here we are, we're asking RLA families and RLA staff if they're in support of changing to the proposed model or maintaining our current. And no surprise, looking at the previous data, that most RLA families and staff are pleased. We had a larger chunk that said, just please, maintain the current model. And similarly, on the right-hand pie graph, that red section, the 29.3 who were in favor of shifting, 19 of that 29 consisted of people who said, yes, we're in favor, but only under certain conditions. And all of those conditions mentioned vaccines. So now I'd just like to bring you into current day and where we are, looking at a timeline for return. So on April 5th, all of our elementary students will shift to a full in-person return. This is something that is mandated by the commissioner, so there's not any real flexibility to start any later than that. Whereas the middle and high school, the commissioner had mentioned that April 28th would be the return date for middle school. And he did not provide us with a date yet for the mandated high school return. So while the 28th was the date that was mentioned, which is the Wednesday after we come back from vacation, our leadership team got together and determined that we would be looking to come back full return for middle school and high school students on April 26th, which is the Monday after vacation. And in both of those statements there, you can see the asterisk, because I want to assure families who are in RLA or who feel that the full return is not going to be a fit for their child for the remainder of the year, RLA will still be an option through the end of this school year. Some people have asked why April 26th. And again, I would like to just point out that that is earlier than what's mandated by the commissioner. But there are a couple of, or several variables that went into our justification for April 26th. First, some had asked, well, April 5th, can't we just send the full K-12 back to the full return? And our memorandum of agreement with the 45-day sort of heads up to the staff members that that's what we're considering doing ends on April 12th. So April 5th would be before that, in which case we would have to have a vote to basically bypass our memorandum of agreement. And looking at the data from the original proposal that I just shared with you, we weren't confident that we would get 50% of the staff, and we understood that the staff had a lot of concern about coming back at 3 feet of distancing without an opportunity for the vaccine to roll out. So there was that date. We were looking at April 12th. So others said, well, why don't you start April 12th? That's the week before vacation instead of starting the week after vacation. But there were some other things that led us to the April 26th date as well. First, the senior experience starts on April 26th. So at the high school level, and the high schools tend to be much more complex, and that's part of the reason why we haven't had any date yet from the commissioner, because there are a lot of additional moving parts, literally and figuratively, at the high school level. And the fact that the senior experience is starting on April 26th, it reduces the high school population at Westford Academy by almost 450 students. So because of that, with the hallway transitions and lunch, it seemed like that would be a more appropriate time to start. Additionally, we signaled to staff and to families that we were looking at starting something different after vacation, which is that original proposal, the data that I just shared with you. So people have been starting to kind of mentally prepare and plan and schedule in their minds for that to be a transition date. So we wanted to be consistent there. At one of the middle schools, that April 26th time is when the schedule rotation for integrated arts would be transitioning. So it just seemed like a clean cut line at that point. It also, we counted the days in school in the hybrid model for Pods A versus Pod B. And Pod A had a less number of days in school in this model than Pod B originally. Plus, Pod A had the week of Thanksgiving. So while those days counted toward in school for Pod A, we know that they're a little bit different on weeks like that are broken up or right prior to a holiday. Pod A was the week before December break, and Pod A was the week before February break. So getting that extra week prior to vacation, which will be a Pod A week, it does help even things out a little bit. So Pod A will have 67 in-person days, and Pod B will have 66 up through that vacation time. And then lastly, which for some who are strictly looking at, you know, some of the guidance, this is an area where I'm thinking of the COVID Advisory Committee and many members, they were really trying to drive home that the vaccination is not a prerequisite for return. And we do acknowledge that. But we also acknowledge that shifting from 6 feet to 3 feet apart is a big ask for staff members who have been so conditioned to the 6 feet. We also wanted to acknowledge that this lengthened the vaccination window by 2 weeks for the teachers in order to get appointments. And fortunately, that is going very well, but we wanted to provide that extra window of time too. So for those reasons, we landed on April 26th for middle school and high school. So some of the general details, and then we'll dive into each of the levels. A full return will be a full day for grades 1 through 11, because remember the seniors are out on senior experience, and grade kindergarten is not going to go for the full day. They will continue to be released at 12:20, and we'll get into that when we talk a little bit more about elementary. Monday through Friday, every week. And this is an option for current RLA students and current hybrid students. So there were some people who were questioning, if I'm RLA now, do I have to transition before April 5th to hybrid in order to qualify for this full return? And the answer is no. for anybody in any model, you are welcome to return to this full return, and there doesn't have to be any sort of transition step in there. And then the same thing, the RLA, for the RLA, they'll continue to, that will be available for the remainder of this school year. And it's available for our current RLA students to stay there, or for our current hybrid students to shift over to RLA. We do have to acknowledge the fact that classroom locations may change in order to ensure that all students are at least 3 feet apart. And there might be classrooms that change out of their regular classroom to an art room, for example, in which case, in that case, art might be going from classroom to classroom on a cart, which we do quite a bit right now, but those are the types of shuffling scenarios that the principals have to consider and plan for. When students are eating snack or lunch, there'll be 6 feet of distancing because they will be removing their masks. Oh, I just want to go back to the 3 feet as well. So some people are concerned about the 3 feet, and they're saying, you know, if everyone's 6 feet, why is it okay all of a sudden for the 3 feet? And the DESE's original guidance back in June, when we started planning this whole thing, was around 3 feet. And that was from the World Health Organizations, as well as many medical organizations as well. And we understand that the CDC had maintained the 6 foot position. On March 10th, there was a fairly large study that was released, and it was, we're lucky because it was right out of Massachusetts. So it was from school districts here in Massachusetts. And they clearly determined that there was negligible differences between transmission in school for both students and staff for those schools that were distancing at 6 feet versus those who were distancing at 3 feet. So this information, this study, which I had linked in the letter that the superintendent sent home, so you can read that more thoroughly, but it has gained national recognition. Dr. Fauci responded and mentioned that 3 feet seems to be a-okay for returning to school. And we've also received signals that the CDC will be releasing new guidance, partly or in whole, I'm not sure, based on this new study. We will continue to have health and safety measures in place just as we do now. All students will be required to wear a mask. The guidance shifted. It used to be 2nd grade required up through high school, and the superintendent was very proactive, and Bill required that all students wear masks here in Westford. So fortunately for us, that's not a change. We continue to have hand sanitizing stations mounted and filled to be used throughout the school day. Hallway traffic will be one way or organized in a way that provides proper spacing. And then desks will be wiped between classes for students who will be switching classes. Quarantined classrooms will attend school remotely. We do understand that if we're shifting from a 6 foot to a 3 foot distance, then there will likely be more close contacts, unless with the new CDC guidance, even to the close contact distance change. I'm not sure if that will come, but there might be times where many students in a classroom or even a whole classroom end up having to quarantine if a student is found positive. And right now that is rarely the case because we have students 6 feet apart. But in those cases, we will have school remotely. We're talking about when individual students have to quarantine, and that varies based on a level. For example, at Westford Academy, students can just continue streaming in from home because we're set up for that. That's how we do our RLA anyway. Whereas at the elementary school, that's going to look different. So we're discussing that and have to continue to fine tune what those plans will be. But the answer is students will not have to be home and absent for 2 weeks. We've just got to determine those details and fine tune all of that, and we'll report back. On that third bullet, students will continue to bring their district issued devices to and from school each day. So we are not going to go back to carts this year at the younger grades, where students just will be given the opportunity for Chromebooks during the school day. They will continue to go one-to-one with the Chromebooks that they have. And that's partly because we don't have the bandwidth to do a full collection and then redistributing them to carts mid-year. And at any given time, we have to be prepared to go remote if something pushes us in that direction, and then students will already have their own devices. And then that last bullet, I did already address that if an entire class has to quarantine, we'll work remotely and we'll continue to develop the plan for individual students. Moving on to busing, the capacity limitations have been lifted about a month or so ago. So the requirement is that masks must be worn by all students, all ages, all the time. Windows must be cracked at least 2 inches and open further than that if the weather allows. Students will be assigned to a particular bus and seat, or we'll continue to do the spray down between students. So we'll just be sure that students are in a seat where it's been cleaned and sanitized, and or it's a seat that only they would be sitting in. And then families still have the opportunity to get or purchase a bus pass for the spring. So if you're RLA and you're looking to go participate in this full return, then you would still go through the normal process, and a bus pass would be available for purchase. Moving ahead to lunches, students will be 6 feet apart, and we're going to utilize outdoor spaces as much as possible. Obviously, each physical plant will have a different level of ability of doing this, but we will continue to create outdoor classrooms, outdoor lunches whenever feasible. We're going to have the lunches continue to be grab and go. This will help eliminate the hot lunch lines so that students aren't in line trying to maintain the 3 feet apart as they're inching toward the line. And the way that they're packaged, it's easy to transport. So if they're moving to an outdoor location, for example, or if the principals are using outside of the cafeteria, even indoor locations, these lunches will be easy to transport. So we're working with Colleen Wallace on getting that up and running. And of course, the spaces at each building vary. So the procedures from one building to the next on how to handle lunch will be different by school. So now I'm going to hand it over to Chris Sardella and Susan Dubois, who will talk about some elementary specific implications for the full return on April 5th.
Good evening. We look forward to welcoming students back in 3 weeks. And with our collective perseverance and flexibility and teamwork, we will pivot once again in the following ways. As far as recess is concerned, just as Dr. Clary said for lunch, we will remain in our classroom groups, masked, and we will separate into different areas. For example, at NAB, this may look the following. We may have a class on the backfield. We may have another class on the playground equipment and another class on the blacktop. Remaining 3 feet apart, as I said, masked. And as Dr. Clary mentioned about the contact tracing, this, certainly make that process much smoother by remaining in instead of our pod groups, it's that larger pod, it's the whole class. As far as our specialist classes, spirit class, art, music, and PE, those classes may occur in the classrooms, such as like art on the cart, which we have done, and music and so forth, because we may need the music room and the art room for other spaces, perhaps overflow for cafeteria and eating in the cafeteria, maybe even a classroom. As far as kindergarten, their time schedule remains as it is now, coming in at 9:05 with the first and second graders. And this time now they will continue leaving at 12:20 while the first and second graders remain. And we are aware for our kindergarten students who are remote learning academy, that is a very long time on the screen. And so the kindergarten teachers and the teaching assistants are going to continue to work hard together and collaborate for the best practices and what's appropriate, which is going to really transpire into those smaller groups, those breakout rooms, which will limit the amount of time that perhaps all 18 in the class or all 21 in the class are on the screen, making it much more appropriate and manageable and productive. Preschool, this is a little bit different now. We have half-day sessions for preschool, which will be from 9:05 to 11:35. That's the morning session. The afternoon session will be 12:40 to 3:10. And there are some of our youngest students that will have a full day from 9:05 to 3:10, 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday. Our Fridays are just morning only in the AM. And letters were sent today to preschool families with their individual student schedules based on the IEP plan in place. As far as changes to location schedules and teachers, as Dr. Clary said, we're maintaining that 3 feet distance. So it may mean that we have to relocate some classes. We might have to spread out and use the art room or the music room or another space. That's going to vary certainly school to school. We all have very diverse needs and with our layouts, so that will depend. As far as after school care, we're going to evaluate that. We thought it would be much smarter to just get in on April 5th and acclimate ourselves and relook at how we're doing and then take a look at the after school care.
Okay, so I'm going to talk about some potential changes to schedules and teachers. And first, I'd like to acknowledge the significant Herculean effort it has been by our elementary administrators, and in particular, Carolyn Jerslow, Hillary Sturgis, and Scott Middlemiss, to recreate the schedule to work with the full return. It was a multi-step process. So first, we had to rework the schedule to reflect that full day, including lunch periods. We also had to make changes for our integrated arts classes like art, music, and PE, because now they're going to be increased from the 30 minutes that they were in the hybrid model to 45 minutes for the full return. So there were some significant changes to those IAs, which we will be sharing with teachers. Additionally, we are now adding back in our library class and a trimester enrichment class, which will be either research and or innovation lab. And that's currently being worked on and planned by our library media specialists and also the library assistants. So they're working really hard to make sure that that is up and running for our April 5th return. And then the second step of that process is the schedule has to go to our student support staff, because we want to make sure that we continue that momentum, that nobody loses time with services, and that they have to take a look at that schedule to make sure it works for all of those children who do receive supports. Thirdly, then it's going to go to the teachers who need to work with our math and reading interventionists, because in the hybrid model, of course, our interventions were provided during the asynchronous time, and now they will be done during the full school day. So that's going to mean that they need to change their schedule. So the interventionists will have to work closely with the teachers to make sure that that can happen. And then finally, and quite important because we have a very robust band and strings program and we want to make sure that that continues, we're going to have to change that schedule as well, because right now the band and string classes are offered remotely during asynchronous times, and they will be done in person for those students who are coming back for the full return. Additionally, the teachers will have to figure out how they're also going to work in the remote students who will still be in the RLA Academy. And what I wanted to add to what Mrs. Dubois was saying with her previous slide, the band and strings now, because they're coming back in person for the students who will be in the full return, we had to order instrument masks. So these are special masks where the student is able to access the mouthpiece for the wind instrument. There will need to be bell covers. And additionally, we need to accommodate not for 3 feet of distancing, but 10 feet of distancing for a wind instrument. So that's going to be a significant change. And we're looking at spaces in our 3 to 5 schools to make sure that that can happen. And so the next part is about the teacher. Of course, we want to reduce the stress of families and students and keep all of our students with their current teachers, but it may not be possible for a variety of different reasons. Take a look at that first bullet, current hybrid students who may shift to RLA or vice versa. So it's not going to be possible for them to have the same teacher, particularly if that teacher is currently a full hybrid and will be doing full return or RLA. The second bullet is some students in some classes whose teacher has mixed pods. So if you take a look at the diagram here, in our current model, you could have a teacher, you can see teacher number 1 has a pod A, which is a remote learning academy, 11 students, and then her pod B would be hybrid with 10 students. And then you see another teacher with a mixed pod situation. And so what would that look like on April 5th? So it could be that teacher 1 takes all of those RLA students that were formerly broken up between 2 teachers. And then the second teacher would be taking all of the full return students. So you can see that in that particular case, obviously the student would have to go to a different teacher. The third bullet is that, of course, some of those students whose classrooms have to be rebalanced because we want to make sure that we are not overloading one class and another one having a light load. So we want to make sure that we have a balance too. That's why it's so critical for all parents to meet that deadline on that survey, which is on Tuesday, I believe at 4 p.m., because we really would like to start planning and to reduce the stress of the teachers and the families, to make sure that we make a smooth transition, whether your student is going to stay with their current teacher or not. We would like to start that planning, so please do adhere to that. As Dr. Cleary said, the RLA Academy is very much a viable option for families. I know that I've been receiving some concerns that somehow the remote learning would not count towards structured learning time. So that means that the remote learning as we had it in the previous hybrid model, meaning the asynchronous pieces. So those wouldn't count, but our RLA is very much, as I said, a viable option. And remote learning, in fact, is now going to look like teachers having the opportunities to have full class time with all of their students, but just like in the regular classroom, there would be times for children to work independently and then times for children to be working in small groups with the teacher. So we're eliminating asynchronous learning and we're now going to shift more to small group and independent structured learning opportunities. And so these pictures just represent some of our examples of elementary seating. And you can see both of those represented in these pictures. I believe the first one on the left is something you may see in a pre-K to 2 school. And then in the picture on the right could also be in the pre-K to 2, but more typically also in the 3 to 5 that does not have the table orientations in the classrooms.
Great job. Thank you very much. And I just want to point out the trapezoid table on the left. These are a little bit trickier. There are some classrooms where there could be they can fit one chair per trap table. And you can see in this case, and there you can see that there's a ball seat over here. So that is another type of chair. So it could be different types of seating arrangements, or this could be another chair similar to the one here. But they are slightly facing each other, whereas the guidance says all students have to be facing one way. So the guidance recommends and understands that particularly in our younger grades, we have tables more than desks. So just having students sort of take turns, if they can, one can pivot away and have a clipboard, but have, the table next to him or her. So there will be some kind of trial and error with what makes sense based on the age level, but in all cases, the students will be facing forward and at least 3 feet apart from seat edge to seat edge.
Carrie, may I make a comment for 1 second?
Sure.
Meeting with the maintenance, one of the maintenance men at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning about some plastic shields that could be placed in the middle of the trapezoidal tables that will provide, some mitigating, possibilities, so that that is a distinct possibility for the trapezoidal tables.
All right, now I'm going to hand it off to Chris Chu for the middle school.
Thank you very much. So the first thing to talk about is the impacts that this will have on the RLA model. And when we first looked at the original survey information that Dr. Cleary was talking about from an earlier survey that we had, the impact that we had from families, it seemed that the number of families that might be considering a change to RLA from the hybrid or a change from RLA to the hybrid was very similar. So we didn't anticipate that there would be as large of a shift. And so you look at the 2 different possibilities that we talk about there. We say that in the first bullet that teachers would still remain having a one section of RLA students that they would teach remotely. That's what happens at both of the middle schools, is that the teams are organized so that there is one full section of RLA students who stay together all day, just as the other advisories stay together. Well, the initial information that we're seeing indicates that there probably is going to be a very large shift from RLA to hybrid, which would mean, if that is the case, we might have to dismantle those full RLA sections and actually take RLA students on the teams and have them join in-person advisories as well. So then they would be live streaming their classes, similar to the way we have had to do with just a few world language classes. But that is a possibility that we might be looking at, because our advisories can only fit so many students in them in the first place. And so if each team has 4 advisories and one of them is a full RLA section and the other 3 advisories start inching up to a higher number, then we would need to spread the RLA students out so that we could then use that 4th advisory room, if you're following that explanation. So that might be something that we need to do. The in-person model for people who will be joining us in school will be that all of our students will continue to travel to the different content areas and the IA classes that they have. The schedule is going to resemble what we would typically have, with the exception of we're going to move our morning advisory to the middle of the day and have it opposite the lunches, so that then we'll have 6 lunches in our advisory block. We'll have 6 lunches during the day in advisory block, which will allow us, we typically have 3 lunches in the school, but both of the middle schools will need to go with a 6th lunch in order to accommodate all of the students that will be coming back. So Murphy's Law, my dog decided to join me and start barking at this moment. She hasn't been barking the whole meeting, but when I started talking, she decided she wants to start joining the conversation as well. So I apologize for that. As Dr. Sardella mentioned, our band and string students will be able to continue with their instruction. The difference will be that now they'll be in the building. we share our band and string teachers between the two buildings, so that it might impact the frequency with when they're having their lessons. Right now, they're having a lesson once every single week. But then we might need to spread that out because Miss Garino will be in one building for 1 week and Miss Audison would be in the other building, and then they'll kind of swap between the two of them. So it might impact the frequency within they're having those lessons, but they'll be able to have lessons in person, which will be great. And any students who are participating in the RLA Academy, they'll still be able to continue to have their lessons remotely as well. The big change that could potentially happen, it's similar to what Dr. Sardella was explaining, is that we might need to rebalance our advisories. So in the exact same way that he was talking about, if one pod was an in-person group and the other pod for that same teacher was an RLA section, then we might need to move that RLA group to join the other RLA section on the same team. So that the students would keep the same teachers, but their rotation of classes might change. And in doing that, it could impact their IA classes, because all of our A classes went on a very specific rotation this year based on their advisory. And so if we change a group of students' advisory, it could impact which IA they go to, and a student might need to either repeat an IA or they might miss one. Now, our teachers are prepared for that. So if a student ends up taking one of the courses again, they would do, you know, a different curriculum, and they would be continuing with it and be able to have extensions to that. So it wouldn't be a true repeat of the course. It would just be additional time in that subject area. At Stony Brook, our 8th grade teams are divided into one 6-person team and one 4-person team. So it is very possible that on the 6-person team, the victory team, that as we're rebalancing advisories, a student might need to change, say, their math teacher. If half of the group goes to a different group, it could impact in that regard. They would still stay on the same team, and we're going to do everything we can to minimize that, but it is possible that that could happen as well.
Thank you very much, Dr. Chu. And now we're going to shift to Westford Academy. So Jim Antonelli is going to speak to these changes.
Good evening, and this is certainly exciting. We think about 1 year ago when the bottom dropped out and we had to make and pivot, the word pivot, and make all these changes. But we've survived, and hopefully our kids are more resilient and our families are more resilient based on this. We will continue to live stream in-person RLA. I do welcome back as many students that want to come back to the high school, but I do understand that some students will want to continue RLA. We will have the new schedule, which is a 5-drop-2. So we're excited to pilot that at the end of this school year. As Dr. Clary pointed out, our senior experience will begin on 4/26, and that will allow us to have 440 less students in the building. As much as I want to have my seniors back with me, we do have the senior experience, which is a great opportunity for them to get out and explore some other opportunities. And our last day for seniors will be 4/16. We've gotten some parent requests, some student requests in regards to having our seniors back in the building, and we're pulling together a 4/16 seniors only, and just finalizing that with Dr. Cleary and Superintendent Olson to have our seniors in the building and have grades 9 through 11 asynchronous in the morning and synchronous in the afternoon. So we want to have that opportunity for our seniors to come in the building and be together one more time and allowed to see their teachers, hand back some materials, and just be together as a class. We do have lots of activities coming in the next couple of months. I sent out the calendar on Friday with the help of Dean Betsy Murphy. So we're certainly excited to provide some positive memories, I'm hoping, as we end this year. It's not how you start, hopefully it's how you finish, and we're hoping to finish very strong. We will continue to have lengthened transition and mask breaks and desk sanitizing. We are going to limit it a little bit more. We had about 14 minutes before. We're going to have 9-minute passing times. just to eliminate some of the gathering that can take place in the hallway as we increase the numbers. We do have traffic flow around the school and signage everywhere to keep students moving. And students will be able to go outside of the building and walk around the building to get a mask break. We also have access points. Thank you to our technology department, several access points outside of the building. And we moved some stadium seating, some bleachers up against the school so teachers will be able to take students outside into those learning spaces. We're looking at either 5 or 4 or 5 lunch blocks based on the number of students to come back, and we're still waiting for the surveys to be completed, and hopefully most of you will do that by tomorrow at 4 o'clock. We have ordered the tent for outside the cafeteria, so we've got 2 levels of the caf, and we're going to be creative. We have the courtyard, and we also have outside seating with picnic tables, and we'll have the tent so it can be used in inclement weather. We have details coming up for prom and graduation. Prom, we're looking at Kimball's right now. We were not able to pull off the Danvers Port Yard Club, unfortunately, based on the size, but we are having several opportunities that we're negotiating with Kimball's right now, which will be a great opportunity for our students to get together. And guidance for graduation, still waiting, but if we follow what we did last year, we would have our graduates spread out all over the field and our parents with us, and perhaps some additional family members this year. We're hoping so we get a little bit more clearance on that as it opens up, as we continue to open up in Massachusetts. So in addition, there was one question that came in earlier today about AP students. We are not asking the students to take the AP exam this year. If they would like to take it, they're welcome to take it. If they want to remain in classes up to the exam, that's what we're suggesting, if they're going to take the exam. But if they choose not to take the exam based on this tumultuous year that we've had, they would be done on April 16th and be able to go into their senior experience. So we were very excited. We got a lot of movement around the school to get things prepared, but we're up for it, and we're excited to have kids back at WA.
Thank you very much. And I hope all of you see that the representatives we have here tonight really represent the entire team and the teamwork that goes into shifting this cruise ship on a dime. While we do have, some time to plan and prepare, there are so many logistics that go into it, and we're being very deliberate and very thoughtful. And I just want to commend the leadership team for, carving out many hours in their busy day to get together with us to dissect the guidance and to create a plan that certainly matches the guidance, but within the context of Westford Public Schools and where we are now. So thank you all for your assistance with that. Next, I would just like to share what the next steps look like as we move forward. So here we are tonight. We've introduced our plan. I'm sure there are more questions, and we're happy to answer those. And there are also questions that we won't be able to answer yet. There's still planning that will continue. I know the superintendent is meeting with the operations subcommittee to talk about some of the nuances with the safety and security measures as we return fully to school in April. And additionally, and I think probably more importantly, some of the larger decisions can't be made until we get the numbers from parents. So there are some parents who had emailed and said, can you tell me what the survey data looks like right now? And, should we assume that it's going to be 3 feet, or maybe there's not a lot of people coming back. So could we say that it's about 5 feet? And unfortunately, just with the incomplete data, we can't draw any real conclusions right now. And that's hard for the parents who really need to understand each of the details in order to make a decision. Some parents had the decision made before this thing even started, but I understand that in some cases, there are assumptions that families have to make in order to make that decision. But if you could just make it on some of or all of the facts that we presented tonight. Even if we have classrooms that can be spaced 4 feet apart, you really should answer the survey based on your comfort level with the 3 feet apart. I understand, I think probably the biggest concern or question mark for parents is my child going to be the one that has to switch teachers? And again, that's information we can't provide until we know who's going where, how many are coming back, how many are RLA. So in terms of next steps, the school committee, we're asking for your vote tonight on the April 26th full return for middle school and high school. There isn't a vote that's needed for elementary because the April 5th date is mandated from the commissioner. But because this April 26th proposal is in advance of the date that has been mandated by the commissioner, then there does need to be a vote for the middle school and high school plan. A reminder, several of the principals did a great job putting this plug in. The deadline for the survey is tomorrow, March 16th at 4 p.m. and 1 survey per student is required. We're asking for everybody to participate. And while we really can't say too much about the data, because after tonight's meeting, I know there's a whole slew of parents that wanted to hear this presentation before making the determination, but I can just share a snapshot that as of 3:30 today, we had 800 K-2 responses. 2 students in that 800 are switching to RLA from, they're currently in hybrid and won't do the full return. They're going to go RLA. So there are 2 of those students, whereas there are 90 current RLA students who say, yes, we're going to go back and participate in this full return. In grades 3 through 5, we, as of 3:30 today, this could all change, we had 875 responses, and there were 3 students who are currently in hybrid that said, on the full return, we're going RLA, whereas 100 RLA students will be participating in the full in-person return. In grades 6 through 8, there were 880 responses as of 3:30. 5 students are going to be switching to RLA. They're currently in hybrid, whereas 85 students who are currently RLA are so far going to be shifting back to the in-person. And then lastly, Westford Academy, we've had 780 responses, and mind you, these surveys only went up through grade 11, so seniors are not counted for in here because they did not have to take the survey. So of the 780, there were 9 students who indicated, or families who indicated that their child will switch to RLA and won't do the full return, whereas 48 students who are currently RLA will be shifting back. So one conclusion that we can draw so far is that there's not a lot of people who are currently in school in the hybrid that are going to be shifting to RLA and won't participate in the full return. Whereas there is a fairly significant amount of RLA students who are currently not in the building who will be participating in a full return. So from a family's point of view, I think that it's important to take a look at the school as if it were a full return, because the number of RLA students that we currently have, it seems, will be decreasing and shifting to in-person. Okay, so that's in regards to the survey. So moving on to the third bullet, then we begin impact bargaining with the Westford Education Association, those officers on March 24th. And that's just an opportunity to sit down with them, to work as a team, and they have been terrific through all of this. And we will be just fine-tuning some of the details on what those impacts are with the changes for the staff members. So that's routine protocol that's necessary in this type of change. The fourth bullet, the leadership team will review the data and make necessary adjustments to student groupings, schedules, and locations as needed. So the principals are very much looking forward to that 4 p.m. deadline tomorrow, that we close the survey, and then they can start looking name by name at students and planning accordingly. And the second to last bullet, communicating to parents who are impacted by the staffing changes. There will certainly be outreach to those families whose students will be shifting teachers. And of course, there'll be careful transitions and a very deliberate process so that the students, so we're minimizing any sort of anxiety of a class shift in April, which is something that we don't typically do. And here we are, we're in a position where we're going to have to do that, but we will be very careful. And we just know that we are equipped for working with students and supporting students when they're feeling like a change is triggering some anxiety or stress, or they have some reluctance. We understand all of that. And we will have the staff in place and the supports in place to make sure students have a successful transition, A, back to school, and B, for those who are even transitioning to a different teacher. And then the most exciting bullet in this entire presentation is this last one. And on April 5th and April 26th, we will welcome most of those students who select to come back for a full return. We have been waiting for this day. We're excited about this day. We know that many people, students, families, parents, guardians, and staff might feel nervous or might feel a little bit scared because it's just been so long. But we are over the moon excited to bring these students back to the normalcy that they deserve after being so flexible and so patient over the past 12 months. So at this point, Gloria would be happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you to the entire leadership team. Obviously, a lot of work went into that presentation. I've currently got 40 some odd questions in the Airtable. If I start doing them one by one, we'll be here till midnight. So I'm gonna try, and I've tried to pull out kind of the most frequently asked questions I'm seeing. If anyone has a question that doesn't get answered this evening, I encourage you to reach out directly to your building leadership and they can help you. But I'm gonna run down the frequently asked question list. Since you acknowledged at the end of your presentation, Carrie, that we certainly have families and students who are super excited about this, and we have some who are super anxious about this. So what preparations are we making to provide social, emotional, and mental health supports for students during this transition?
Well, oh, Bill, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I'll be meeting with the sometime next week with the social emotional committee in terms of making sure that in a similar manner to next school year, we don't want to go full tilt in the first couple of days of the school year. We'd like to have an opportunity, the students to have a little bit more of a relaxed introduction to school again. We know that some of them are going to be nervous. We're all going to be nervous. I mean, this has been such a departure from the norm for all of us. So we'll come out with some specific ideas for each grade span in terms of what we're looking to do.
And our teachers, our adjustment counselors, our principals, our assistant principals will all be prepared for students as they transition in. Teachers are going to reintroduce what classroom routines look like, whether they have changes or not, similar to what they would do on the first day of school. The thing about education, our public education, is that every year we have this long summer that from a child's point of view, how they leave school in June and how they come back in September, they completely transform. And I know that it's been a lot longer than 2 months since we've been in a normal routine, but we have to keep in mind that school has not been closed. They've been coming to school either virtually or in person, just, the group size will be significantly different, but we will be sure that teachers spend the time to connect with students, make sure that students feel comfortable in their class environment, connecting with their peers, and reestablishing routines versus kind of just diving right in, assuming that they're ready to, open up to chapter 4 when they arrive. So we will be very careful. And again, I think that the adjustment counselors that we have at our schools are phenomenal in working with the principals to prepare for and identify some of the students who we know and can predict may have a difficult time, and more proactively, there will be some families that are getting individual phone calls from either a teacher or an administrator to begin that transition process for the students who have a more difficult time coping with change.
Dr. Shu.
I was just going to piggyback on that a minute and remind everybody that one of the benefits of the model that we've been going through this year was the small groups of students who have been working together in each one of the pods. And so yes, there might be some changes, some small changes for smaller groups and maybe even some individuals. In the bigger picture, our teachers are going to be bringing 2 groups that have gotten to know each other very well together. And so that's another piece of it that I think helps with this transition, is that our teachers they're cognizant of that. They know they've been working with the groups of students. And so I think they're now ready to acquaint the 2 groups together, as far as, with, talking about different practices that they might need to introduce now that they're bringing everybody together. But that's one of the benefits, is that these smaller groups have gotten to know each other very well. And so I think that in some cases will add an extra layer of support even for the students.
Thank you. Bill.
I just say that on Sunday evening, March 21st at 7 p.m., some of our physicians from the COVID Advisory Committee will be spending some time with the community. We will set that up tomorrow or on Wednesday. They have been excellent in terms of advising us about 6 feet versus 3 feet of distancing, with the latest research, not only from this country, but from around the world, has indicated. And can't thank them enough for making themselves available. Once again, 7 p.m. I will send out a notification of that. It'll be on this upcoming Sunday evening, March 21st.
Thank you, Bill. There were a couple of other questions about health and safety. One question was, has there been evidence, or do we have definitive numbers of in-school transmissions? And I believe the answer to that is none, or practically none, correct?
I think we have one. I'll double check that, but I think over the last several months, we've had only one in-school transmission.
And with this return, will the schools be participating in any testing programs or pooled testing programs?
No, we've chosen not to do that. Like a little bit more than half of the school systems in Massachusetts. If somebody tests positive, then we do the contact tracing and we act accordingly. The pool testing is time consuming, it's expensive, it's disruptive. And our nurses have unanimously stated that they don't think it possesses the value that one might think. So, because there is a succession of additional tests once a positive is identified in a pool of swabs, and so there's a lot to be said to not pool test.
These should be relatively quick ones. For students who haven't had a bus pass yet, but will need a bus pass, they will be able to purchase a bus pass for the remainder of the year?
Yes, they will. It'll be $150 each, with a family cap for the remainder of this year of $350.
And if there are juniors who want and need to purchase a parking pass, will they be able to do that?
Parking passes not necessary. It's wide open because the seniors will be off campus. So juniors can park.
Okay, freebie for the juniors. Let's see, other questions. I think actually most of the high school questions got answered in the presentation. Thank you. For kindergarten level, it was indicated that there was not going to be a full day K option this year, but there were several questions in the chat about if parents were willing to pay full day K tuition, why wouldn't that be an option? Or alternatively, is there potentially going to be some kind of extended day option that would offer care for a longer time for kindergarten students?
Well, the extended care we will not be offering right now for the remainder of the school year. We're also not going to offer, the early arrival option because we want to minimize the degree of contact between students in any setting. So the extended care and early arrival are not on the table. Susan or any others, or Carrie, on the full day K?
Yeah, we did talk about full day kindergarten. There are a couple of things there. First is related to budget, right? We don't have the tuitions to offset the full salaries, and we did not reduce our force in kindergarten, despite the fact that those tuitions were not available to us this year. But what we were able to do and will continue doing is offering some additional intervention services for students who qualify in the afternoon. And because of that, we are able to apply CARES funds to fund their salary, whereas we don't have it budgeted in our current operating budget without that tuition. So that's kind of the budget piece. But the other part is we do like the fact that the right now, this program, while it is not a full day, it is longer than our typical half-day program. So it is kind of an extended half day, but also we will continue to provide eligible students with interventions. And we think that that's very important, partially because the interventions in the afternoons can be done unmasked. And there are a lot of kindergarten students who are having difficulty because, particularly when they're looking at the phonemic awareness and just mouth formations with the particular sounds, having the masks on is very difficult. And as a result, they're not progressing to the level we would expect them to, even within the hours that we're giving them because of that limitation. So being able to tailor our instruction to the students who have shown that they really need this additional time, mask-free in the afternoon, that's what the teachers will be doing after the students are dismissed. They'll continue to offer the eligible students those services.
So that's mask-free, synchronous, but remote instruction for those students who need that intervention.
Correct.
Okay. There were a number of other questions about what is RLA going to look like for RLA students, particularly. I think there's a lot of questions at the elementary level of, will those elementary RLA students be live streaming into classrooms? Will they have dedicated RLA classes? If they have dedicated RLA classes, like how will they be broken up? And I think you commented on a little bit in the presentation, but given that there's so many questions about that, what does RLA look like for those youngest learners?
Our goal is to keep RLA similar to what it is now. We are not intending on shifting the model to live streaming. It very much depends on the numbers. If there were a case where all but 2 students chose to return and only 2 students chose RLA, then we wouldn't be able to designate an entire teacher for those 2 students. So we would have to shift our thinking. But similar to what we did in the summer in preparation for the school opening, we will cluster RLA students in a way that the RLA is assigned to an RLA teacher. That's our goal. And now we just need the numbers to work. And there is some flexibility with what that number is. So it's not like we just need one particular target number. It might be, 15 or 20 or 22 students in an RLA. So there is flexibility there. And with RLA, if we had to, we would be able to go across district as well, which we wouldn't do that at first until we absolutely needed to.
So other questions kind of along those same lines, Carrie. I think people are trying to get a sense, and I don't know, maybe you'd need a crystal ball for this one. Like, what are the odds that someone might have a teacher change? Either it sounds like those odds are higher, maybe at the elementary level. I don't know if there would be any need for teacher changes up at the high school level. I'm not sure. Middle school falls in between. Like, do you have any intuition about what the odds are people's teachers might change?
I wouldn't want to try to quantify that because we wouldn't be able to even start to guess until that survey closes. It will be more prevalent at the elementary levels because of the way that we have them all potted up into a RLA class. So in many cases, like the diagram that Dr. Sardello went over, if there are 2 classes, both of them have mixed pods, chances are 50% of each of those classes will flip-flop. There are some situations where there's only 1 mixed pod class at a grade level at a school. And so they don't have this other partner teacher that they can sort of trade, I'll take the 2 RLA and I'll take the 2 hybrid, in which case we are looking to reallocate a staff member to partner teacher with that teacher. And those 2 individuals will act as co-teachers and they'll plan together. And one teacher will address the in-person kids and teach the concept to them while the other co-teacher teaches the RLA students, so plans for it remotely. So they're teaching the same thing and there are 2 bodies and each of them only have half the class. So that's a scenario where somebody's in a mixed pod and there may not be a teacher change. There just might be a teacher added, but we couldn't do that for every mixed pod teacher because we have 19 mixed pods and we wouldn't have that many bodies to go in and do that sort of tag team effect.
So there was one other question associated with the mixed pods, and then I'll absolutely open it up to the committee as well. There are a couple of parents who really, they're attached to their teacher, and they would prioritize staying with the teacher over the particular model. So if they knew they're in one of those mixed pod situation and that their child's classroom teacher is going to shift to in person or is going to shift to remote, they would care more about staying with the teacher than picking one model over the other. Is there any possibility for those people to follow the teacher into whichever model? How would they handle that? Should they just contact their building principal? I'm not sure how to answer that one.
Sure. We aren't able to place students using that type of criteria. We need to place students right now based on what makes the most sense for a classroom makeup. And then after that, I could see a parent say, okay, I chose in person, my child's teacher went RLA, and if there are 22 in-person students and that teacher ends up having 18 RLA students, then the parent, I suppose, could say, I'd like to make a switch because there's space, and then that RLA teacher goes from 18 to 19. and the hybrid, I'm sorry, the full return teacher goes from whatever I said, 22 to 21. So there could be things like that that happen after the fact, and that would only be if it truly lends itself.
Okay, so at this point, parents should pick what's best for your kid and then communicate with your teacher and building principal if you need to adjust.
Yes.
Gotcha. Okay. I think that covered a lot of things from the Airtable. Again, I apologize if I didn't catch everything. I know there were a couple of things that just came in right now that I'm sure I haven't seen yet, but I'm going to open up to the committee for questions. And I appreciate everybody's patience on this. Chris.
I'm going to be quick and just ask one. With the potential that an individual in the class may have to quarantine, I think you explained pretty well that it could be, especially at the elementary level, that a whole class quarantines because of 3 feet. At the middle school and high school level, that's a little more problematic with teachers teaching multiple classes. Is the plan to ensure that the teacher has a greater separation from the students? Try to keep like a 6 foot at least separation at the middle school and high school level such that we don't have teachers quarantining like on a possibly regular basis and disrupting other classes?
I can answer, yes. We're going to do our best, Chris, to keep that separation. You know, we do have some larger spaces. To Gloria's point earlier, you know, we're going to have to switch teachers at WA. I don't see that happening. We would switch classrooms. So we had a larger classroom of students. We would flip-flop with, you know, those spaces to accommodate based on the more space that we need based on the size of the class.
And that's the same at the middle school. We actually, in looking at how many students we could fit in the rooms at the 3 foot spacing, we still maintain the 6 foot spacing for the teaching space. So we'll still be able to maintain that distance.
Excellent, thank you.
Avery.
A WA question. I think it came out that when we return in April, we'll be switching to the 5-drop-2. Is that correct? And will that be what RLA students follow, or will they remain in the current model?
They will be right in the same schedule at Avery. They'll do the 5-drop-2. Yep, and they'll follow the same schedule, live streaming right in. Yep.
Other questions, Valerie?
Thank you. I can't imagine what went into this, so I just want to appreciate all of that work and all those, as Gloria says, juggling chainsaws that I know is happening. I just had a question, but was there a discussion about having some sort of like I'm not going to say it right, but like the form about travel over April vacation, or some sort of like, I don't know, good faith effort that everyone's kind of following best practices over April vacation?
Well, there will be that reminder that I will be sending out, Valerie. The only thing I don't want to do is like another local school system, have the parents sign some, you know, some form. But I will be sending out, you know, the travel requirements, you know, the testing, any quarantine period. That will go out probably 2 weeks before the April vacation.
Thank you. And I just had a kindergarten question. Was there a discussion about using the revolving fund to fund these 2 months for full-time?
We haven't discussed that. I know that is an alternative, although we don't want to work that down into a zero balance, because we do need some seed money to as a hedge against any variability in registrations and fee collections the following year. So that's a possibility to use some of that, but it's also possible to use any of the first round of CARES money that might be remaining, and we're working with the town to assess that balance. So could be a little bit of kindergarten revolving fund balance, although I prefer not to. The more likely would be any CARES Act money that might be available from the first round of funding.
Oh, I meant to use it to fund that 0.4 to make them
I'm
last the
sorry,
full day.
Okay, I'm sorry. Well, we hadn't discussed that to make it a full day. We felt it was best to stay with the extended half-day schedule, keeping in mind that, Carrie, I think as you said, the current schedule is about almost an hour longer than the conventional half-day kindergarten day. So that's what we have planned, is to just stay with that schedule for right now.
Thank
If
you.
parents are willing to pay for it.
I'm sorry, Valerie, Avery?
Even if parents are willing to pay for FTK, do we not have space? I mean, I think space could be a real issue in trying to move the classrooms around.
Well, space is a consideration. That's one of the things that we were talking about in terms of we bringing all of them back. Keeping in mind 3 feet distancing is tight in some very tight in some classrooms. It becomes a little bit more of a challenge. Also with the nature of the tables, whether it be trapezoidal tables or round tables in the early childhood levels. And so, that's the subject of one of my meetings tomorrow morning is, making sure that we keep children as safe as possible at those primary levels.
And I think it's also, when we were talking about it, again, those afternoon interventions, we really want to target for the students who are struggling. And it is very difficult to have 18, 20 students for an entire day to physically contain themselves. It's a very high expectation to ask 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds to stay in their personal body spaces. I mean, that's a skill we work on, and it's difficult under normal circumstances. So now you add these extra pieces in where all students are facing forward. It's not a kindergarten environment that we feel that we would want to fully embrace and say, yes, a 6-hour day is perfectly okay for 5-year-olds the way we do under normal circumstances when we're offering full day K. There's just so many restrictions.
Any other committee questions at this time? Again, I tried to address as many questions from the Airtable as I could. If your question didn't get addressed, please reach out to your building leadership. And I know the hour is getting late, and I appreciate everyone's patience as we worked through this. This is a difficult process, but I believe it is time to put a motion on the floor.
Gloria, can I briefly just say something?
Of course, Sean.
So it's not a question because I think that we have really answered all the major questions. But I mean, again, this is just so impressive. The fact that this has come since March 5th. I mean, we're 10 days out from Commissioner Riley's. It's really, really impressive, and we didn't see ourselves here. But thank you to everyone who took part in this.
Sean, would you like to make a motion, or would somebody else like to make a motion?
Certainly. So I'd like to make a motion to accept the proposal as stated. Specifically, we have to vote that for a 426 return for middle school and high school. Did I miss anything?
Nope, that's the one, because K-5 is regulatory. So I will second Sean's motion on approving the plan to return to school on April 26th for grades 6 through 12. Or I suppose it's 6 through 11, 12 with the senior experience, 12 with an asterisk. Any discussion or questions on the motion? All right, vote is to Avery.
Happily, aye.
Chris.
Aye.
Alicia.
Aye.
Ming Chen.
Aye.
Sean.
Aye with a thumbs up.
Valerie.
Aye.
And I as well. Did I get everybody? The hour is late. I think I did. That is a unanimous vote. Thank you, the entire central office team, the entire building leadership team, our staff, our partners at the WEA. We understand this is a monumental undertaking. So thank you all. so very much.
Thank you all for your support. That's great news.
Okay, are we on to warrants?
We are. Okay, is everyone ready? I just wanted to give a moment for anyone to step out that needed to step out. Thank you to our administrators, please. You don't have to listen to the warrant summary.
But thank you all.
All right, here we go.
You.
Yes. Motion to approve payroll warrant 2138 SP dated March 18th, 2021 in the amount of $2,019,557.50.
Second.
And all in favor, Avery,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Ming Chen,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
aye, it's unanimous.
Motion to approve expense warrant 2138 SE dated March 18th, 2021 in the amount of $657,047.43.
Second.
And votes to Avery,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Ming Chen,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
aye, it would be unanimous. Do we have any minutes for tonight?
Nope, not tonight.
Not tonight. Okay, and final motion of the evening.
Motion to adjourn to executive session to discuss strategy with respect to Unit A collective bargaining, and an open meeting may have a detrimental effect on the bargaining position. The committee will not return to public session.
And do I have a second?
Second.
And roll call, Avery. Chris,
Aye.
Alicia,
Aye.
Ming Chen,
Aye.
Sean,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
aye, that is unanimous. Thank you all for your patience as we made it under the wire before 10. Thank you all. The committee will not return to public session this evening, but we will be in public session tomorrow night for our next interview with Dr. Chu, and Wednesday night with our interview with Dr. Jenger, and Thursday night for final deliberation and vote on future leadership of Westford Public Schools. So please continue to join us this week, and we will see you soon. Thank you, everyone.
Executive.
Chris, do we have a link that you sent?
It's coming right now. Check your inbox.
All right,
Thanks.
Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.
Bye. Good night.
Good night, all.